Throughout all my life, I've never had a good dream. Day by day, it gets harder to tell what's real and what isn't. I'm starting to think, maybe when I'm in this place, I'm not asleep. Maybe this is my reality, this bad place, Marsha whispered to herself as she stared out the window. Everyone, welcome our newest student. The teacher's voice cut through her thoughts, pulling her back to the classroom. A young woman with brown hair and a distant look stepped forward. "Hi, my name is Marsha Young," she said softly, barely raising her eyes. "Please have a seat," the teacher instructed with a warm smile. Marsha nodded, walking slowly toward an empty desk by the window. She set down her bag and began unpacking her things. As she took off her jacket, a few gasps filled the room. Marsha's arms were covered in fresh scratches and bite marks, dark bruises under her sleeves. Her eyes were sunken, as if she hadn't slept in days. She looked like she might collapse any second. The class fell silent, but no one said anything. The teacher cleared her throat and continued with the lesson, writing her name on the board. Miss Lark. Marsha stared out the window, letting the cool breeze wash over her, hoping it would keep her awake. She barely noticed the passage of time as Miss Lark spoke about something, her words a blur. But then everything stopped. Marsha's heart skipped as the room grew deathly quiet. Her vision blurred. She opened her eyes to find herself not in the classroom, but standing in a neon-lit forest under a dark sky, rain pouring down in cold sheets. When did I fall asleep? She thought, panic rising in her chest. The musty smell of wet vegetation filled her nose. "No, not again," she whispered. She knew she was in her nightmare. Her pulse quickened. She needed to find shelter, fast. As she turned, a twig snapped behind her. "Who's there?" she called, her voice shaking. No response. Trembling, Marsha crept closer to the sound, her shoes sinking into the wet mud. She turned a corner, only to exhale in relief. It was just a squirrel. She spun around, ready to leave, but collided with something massive. "Stay back," Marsha shouted, her breath quickening. In front of her was a huge, four-legged creature with glowing red eyes, its sharp teeth glistening in the dark. Behind it, she could see more creatures lurking, their hungry gazes fixed on her. Panic surged through her. She bolted, her legs burning as she sprinted toward a distant cave. She scrambled inside, heart pounding as she tried to catch her breath. The cave was small. There was barely enough room for her to crouch down. Above her, a tiny hole let in the faintest sliver of light, illuminating the odd, glowing plants around her. Growls and heavy footsteps echoed from outside. The creatures were close. She pressed herself against the cave wall, her breath shallow, trying not to make a sound. One of the monsters sniffed the air above her, its drool dripping down onto her head. She froze, not daring to move. Tears slid down her cheeks, her heart hammering in her chest. It lingered for a moment, then walked away. The relief was short. A shadow fell over the cave entrance. Another massive creature had found its way in. Marsha's eyes widened in terror as she backed away. Her hand instinctively reached out in defense, but it only enraged the creature more. With a swipe of its claws, it struck her arm. The pain was blinding. Before it could finish her off, everything went black. Marsha gasped, her eyes snapping open. She was back in the classroom. The bright lights overhead flickered like nothing had happened. "Already sleeping on your first day, Marsha? I'm afraid that's your first warning," Miss Lark said, a disapproving look on her face. The bell rang, snapping Marsha out of her daze. She grabbed her things quickly, her head spinning. Without thinking, she rushed to the nurse's office, her heart still racing. The nurse, a woman in scrubs, looked up with a smile. "Hi, what brings you in today?" Marsha slowly rolled up her sleeve, revealing the fresh scratches and bruises on her arm. "How did you get that?" the nurse asked. Marsha's voice trembled as she spoke, barely above a whisper. "I fell down the steps.